So we're back to talk about more of the nervous system. We're going to start today with looking at just a brief evolutionary history of nervous systems, how they have changed from more simple organisms to more complicated organisms to take on more and more complicated tasks of organizing more sensory organs, more effector cells, more variety of abilities that animals have developed. So some of the earliest animals were what we call radially symmetric, which means they don't have like two sides that are symmetric, but rather they are sort of symmetric around a circle. And these very simple organisms would have just a very simple nervous system. So they would have what we call a nerve net. This is literally exactly what it sounds like. They just have nerves spread throughout their body. No real central nervous system, no coordination of what's going on aside from the nerves just speaking to each other. So we can see a good example of a nerve net here in this polyp where the nerves are just sort of spread evenly throughout the body in like a spider web format. And then what we can see is as we move into more bilaterally symmetric organisms, or organisms where like their line of symmetry is down like a particular line. So like you can see that flatworm is bilaterally symmetric. This insect is bilaterally symmetric. You can like split it down the middle, not where that line drew, but actually down the middle, and they'll be bilaterally symmetric. And so as we move into those organisms, what we see is a trend as we get into more and more complex organisms of centralization, which is moving towards the middle of the body. So the nervous system is sort of becoming more and more centralized. You have here in the flatworm, you have two lines of sort of central nerves. As we move up into this tunicate, you have one big central nerve sort of axis. And then here in the insect, we begin to even see some cephalization, which means moving towards the head. So sort of concentrating the nervous system in the head. This stem, ceph, means head. So we can see lots of ganglia here along this insect in the middle. That's the centralization, and then a few more nerves in the head area than we would typically see and than we'd seen before. So that's the trend towards cephalization. And then when you look here at the squid, which is one of the most advanced organisms that's not a vertebrate, it doesn't have a backbone, we see their nervous system is very centralized, moved much towards the middle, and very cephalized. So a lot of concentration of the nervous system in the head. So these are just some evolutionary trends that we have seen over time as we study various kinds of animals. If we shift to the next slide here, we'll talk about the vertebrates, right, which are sort of the more complicated animals. Vertebrates just have a spinal cord, and that spinal cord protects a very highly centralized nervous system. That's the point of the spinal cord. It does provide, some backbone stability as well, but inside the spinal cord, or the spinal column, is the spinal cord, which is the very centralized nervous system extension from the brain. So we see very highly central and cephalized nervous systems in vertebrates. The vast majority of our nerves are found in our head, in the brain. So we can see this whole thing is essentially made of nervous tissue. It's all a bunch of neurons and their support cells. And then it continues down from the brainstem down at the spinal cord, where it is protected by the vertebra. So you can see you've got the bone structure around the spinal cord providing protection for that. And then we have a hollow area on the inside surrounded by fluid where the nerves actually travel. And then we have area where the peripheral nerves can come out of that to communicate with the rest of the organism. So like we said, your central nervous system is your brain and spinal cord, and we talked about that in the last video. And like I mentioned here, we have a lot of fluid-filled spaces in the central nervous system. All around the brain is a layer of protective fluid. All around the spinal cord, that's all there to protect our very important nervous system. Nerves don't regenerate. They can't grow back. They don't undergo mitosis once they have developed. And so we have to be really careful in sort of our evolution and our development to protect those very important parts of our body that sort of control everything else. And so one of the ways that we do that is to surround it with fluid that protects it from movement, from shock, but as well as having a lot of protection from infection and things like that, because you have this fluid boundary that keeps bacteria and viruses and things from typically being able to get directly at our nervous system. And then, of course, we have our peripheral nervous system, which branches off of that, like we were speaking about the nerves that come off. And they're basically, the peripheral nervous system essentially is composed of cranial nerves, these nerves that come off of the head, right? Because cranial sort of means brain, or having to do with the brain, having to do with the head, and then spinal nerves, which come off of the spine and take those communications and bring information to the spinal cord. So take communications from the spinal cord and bring information to, they operate in both directions. Well, different nerves operate in those both directions to allow for messages to come into our central nervous system and out of our central nervous system. But vertebrates are going to have this highly centralized and cephalized nervous system that we have been studying. So that's basically it that we're going to talk about with the central nervous system. The brain and the spinal cord make up the central nervous system. They're very protected by the body through the use of fluid-filled spaces as well as bone covering. So we have the skull that protects the head and the spine that protects the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system, like we've said before, is where like stuff actually gets done, where we collect information and where we send out information. So we're going to take a deeper look at that next. And there are actually a few different systems that make up the peripheral nervous system. And there are two big divisions. And then one of those divisions has three separate parts. So within the peripheral nervous system, we have the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. And so first we'll talk about the somatic nervous system. The somatic nervous system is the nervous system that we sort of think about most often when we think about the peripheral nervous system. It controls everything that's sort of voluntary, everything that we choose to do. So it controls our voluntary muscles. It controls all of the sort of decisions that we make. So if we think about, well, oh, the nervous system lets me reach out and grab this book. That would be the somatic nervous system is responsible for that. So that's all voluntary, all voluntary actions and choices that we make responding to external stimuli. Anything that we sort of see and then choose what to do. So when we see a sandwich and we decide that we want to eat it, right? That is all the somatic nervous system. And somatic just means body. So essentially it's the control of our body that we have voluntarily. And then second, we have the autonomic nervous system. And autonomic sounds a lot like automatic, and that's kind of what this nervous system is. It's the stuff that is involuntary, that happens without us having to think about it or decide to do it. And so it's very adaptive in that way. It's a lot of reflexes, a lot of changes that we don't have to really think about. And it has three different divisions of the autonomic nervous system. It is in charge of regulating what's going on inside of our bodies. And it controls the other types of muscles, right? Not the voluntary muscles, but the smooth muscles and the cardiac muscles and all of our organs. And so one of the divisions that we'll talk about is the enteric division. And this is our organ system. So the enteric division is in charge of controlling like digestion, our organs, everything that sort of has to run without us thinking about it on a minute by minute basis. That's what the enteric division is going to control. So it's going to, sense that there's food in the stomach and cause the stomach to go through contractions that cause it to sort of grind up the food. It's going to sense that, there's food needs to be passed through the small intestine. So it's going to keep peristalsis going. It's going to take care of all of those automatic things that we don't have to think about on a daily basis. And then the other two divisions of the autonomic nervous system are really adaptive nervous system reflexes, very complex changes that happen in certain situations. And it's the sympathetic division and the parasympathetic division, and they are essentially opposites of each other. The sympathetic division is responsible for your fight or flight response, which we will talk about in a second. And the parasympathetic division is responsible for what we will call the rest and digest reactions of our body. So these, again, are things that are outside of our control. They're non-voluntary, but they are instigated whenever our autonomic nervous system detects stimuli that call for either the sympathetic or the parasympathetic division to activate. And what essentially happens when either one is activated, there's a whole series of changes in the body that occurs. So let's look at the parasympathetic first. Again, parasympathetic is what we are going to call our rest and digest system. So rest and digest. And this is where, like, when the body senses that not much is going on, that there's no danger involved, then it sets out a series of changes throughout the body and sort of keeps your body operating relatively normally. So it's going to constrict your pupils so that you don't have to take in so much light and stimulus. It's going to stimulate saliva production so that you can digest things. It's going to make your mouth sort of moist and have that saliva there. It's going to keep your bronchi relatively constricted because you don't need to be bringing in a ton of nutrients to your body, because you don't need to be working so hard in this rest and digest situation. It'll keep your heart rate nice and slow. It's going to stimulate your digestive system, so the stomach, pancreas, intestines, all of that, so that you can work on breaking down and absorbing nutrients and sort of get ready for anything that might come along. It'll also allow for urination to happen, normal body processes sort of happen. So most of the time, our parasympathetic division is relatively active. As long as we're in a relaxed situation that our body interprets as not stressful or scary, then our parasympathetic division is going to be activated. Now, if you were to walk into my classroom and suddenly encounter a bear, which is not something that you would normally encounter, that's going to activate the sympathetic division, which is responsible for our fight or flight response, which is going to cause us to have the opposite series of changes, basically. It's going to dilate or open up the pupils so that you can take in more sensory information, more light, so you can see a little bit better. It's going to stop saliva production because we don't need to worry about digesting and eating right now. We need to worry about running away from this bear or scary thing, whatever it is that we've encountered. It's going to dilate those bronchi so that they can get more oxygen in, accelerate the heart rate so that we can send more blood to our muscles, really getting ready for that fight or flight, right? You're encountering a dangerous situation. You're either going to have to run away or fight something, is sort of what your body is getting ready to do. It's going to cause epinephrine and norepinephrine. This is what is commonly called adrenaline to be produced. So it's going to have that adrenaline rush that's going to be created by these adrenal glands on the kidney. It's also going to stimulate glucose to be released, again, so that your muscles have all of the energy that they need to run away or fight. It's going to stop the digestive system, because there's just no reason to be wasting energy breaking down food when you need to be running away. Similarly, it's going to inhibit urination so that your body is essentially focusing on doing other things, running away or fighting. So this parasympathetic and sympathetic division of our autonomic nervous system is sort of an automatic program set of responses to opposite situations. Calm, relaxing situations activate the parasympathetic division. Stressful, scary situations activate the sympathetic division of our autonomic nervous system. And so that basically wraps up our discussion of the central and peripheral nervous system.